Three, two, one. Hello, everybody. How you doing today? I'm Todd Ledbetter with All Music, and today we have a very special guest. Jeff Kaiser's in the house. Jeff, how you doing today?
Doing fantastic. Thank
It's
you very
nice to
much.
see you. Thanks for jumping on with us today.
Thanks for inviting me. This is a blast. It's nice. So,
Yeah, it's kind of fun to be able to connect with people through this kind of medium here that you haven't seen for a while, and just have a little
oh yeah,
conversation. And yeah, I'm.
yeah. Ventura in 2007. Think about that.
You clipped out a little bit. Did you say that's how long it's been since you've been here?
Yeah. Well, I moved away in
Oh,
2007. Yeah,
yeah.
but I've been back to do shows and stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy how the time just like flies by already, you know. That's a
Yeah.
long, I mean, 2007 sounds like yesterday, but it is not. Yeah. So what have you been up to since you moved out of Ventura? I mean, what have you been doing?
Well, it's life is remains interesting.
Hmm.
I left Ventura to pursue a PhD in in a program called Critical Studies and Experimental Practices. It changed its name to Integrative Studies. I'll unpack that because just those titles alone are like, what the heck does that mean? You know. But yeah, I left Ventura to do that, and boy, what a blast that was. I mean, as I left as a 45-year-old incoming grad student to getting that degree was wild.
Mm.
But the program at UC San Diego that I went to is an artist scholar program, meaning that usually you'll go to school for one or the other. You'll go to be, I want to be a scholar of some sort. I want to be a musicologist in music, or an ethnomusicologist, or I want to be a composer, or I want to be a trumpet player. There's usually these very focused silos, but I wanted to like do kind of it all at this stage of the game, and so it was a program that was super interesting to me, so I jumped on it, the opportunity, and just had a great time there for 6 years. It was remarkable. Don't let age hold you back, my friends.
Yeah, I know. I went back to college without any kind of college credits whatsoever. I think I was 38, and then I graduated when I was with a master's. I was so intense about it, and little less than 5 years.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
doing summer programs. I was doing internet classes. I was just boom, 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 man. I just
Oh man.
went for it. But so you went to this college to pursue this degree. Now, were you already sort of? It was interesting to you because you were kind of already into that kind of thing as far as music goes. It's hard for me to ask questions because I don't quite understand exactly what all your music entails, and because it's very experimental. It's different than
Yeah.
what most. It's definitely not mainstream, and a lot of people haven't heard this kind of thing. And you have, like, from what I can see, at least like close to 20 albums of music
Yeah.
on your
Yeah.
Bandcamp.
Yeah. On the Bandcamp, and think I think I'm into the 30s as collaborator. You know, if you count my duos and stuff like that now, and I've got it's been a little bit slow. But I've got a few more albums coming out. They kind of like when I went back to school, it kind of like slowed down the pace a little bit, but it's
Yeah,
picking back up.
yeah.
The music I do. So there was a connection to academia because um, universities can provide uh, a space for research and experimentation of things that maybe aren't happening right now, but maybe will be happening someplace, sometime. I mean, the music is happening now, but what I mean is it's not well accepted. But the tools that are created in the university in terms of experimentation get used, worldwide by popular artists, popular musicians. So, for instance, one of the professors I studied with, Miller Puckett, he authored a programming environment called Max MSP, and in that was he authored that in the 80s. Okay, it was a couple years ago bought by Ableton, and is now built into Ableton Live so people can author their own plugins within this visual programming environment. So people might think that, oh, there's this ivory tower attitude and it's only for the academics, but there's actually a lot of crossover into popular society and popular music. So the same tools I do my more experimental music with are also being used by DJs and pop stars from, you know, I mean, Radiohead became and I don't even know how to say their name. I've never said their name out loud. Autaker? Autaker? God, that's ridiculous. I should know how to say their name.
Huh.
AU. You know that band I'm talking about?
No,
Anyway,
no.
uh, my friends are going to be laughing at me when they listen to this. Hey, you don't even know how to pronounce the name? Well, yeah, listen to them. So there's a lot of groups that are using these tools that are developed in the academy, the quote unquote ivory tower, that go out and get used in popular music. And by the way, when I use the term experimental music, it gets used in different ways. I mean, it
Yeah.
is a genre that you can click on iTunes, or Bandcamp. It's like it's this is genre, and I actually don't like that term because that's creating walls, and it's like saying this is this is where experimentation takes place. But
Hmm.
in fact, to me, experimenting is to experiment is it's a verb. It's something that people do, and they do it in all music. They do it in every music from rock and roll to hip hop, and so that word is a little bit problematic because it's used as a genre. But I tend to use it as an activity that people
Mm.
do.
Yeah.
My experimentation is into exploring sounds I want to hear, sounds I haven't heard, new ways of working, new ways of thinking, new ways of generating timbral interest. It's really for me. It's about an exploration and looking for exciting things, and then those exciting things I presented to the public. They're exciting to me anyway. You
Yeah.
know.
Well, I've listened to a couple of your albums, a little more than a couple, all the ways through, and then I was kind of just cherry picking a few other ones because there's so many of them. And you're right. I do hear a lot of sounds that I've heard in popular music, like, well, I don't know how popular, but like Bell X1 is a band that I like out of Ireland, and there's a lot of almost like just program type computer sort of sounds and noises and effects and things like that that I can hear. So like you said, it's now built into the Ableton, and these people are using those techniques, and
Yeah.
it is something that when you listen to and you take from where it started from, and then you hear where it's being produced into more of a mass media form, you can hear those sounds. Yeah.
Yeah, if you were to go listen to Miller Puckett's work, especially the stuff in the early days of his development of the software, you would be like, yeah, it's like it's for lack of a better term, modern classical music. It's works for solo piano, for flute, for these kinds of things. It's very very experimental, but to see it now used in all parts of the world, it's just all parts of the musical world is amazing to me.
Hmm. Well, I've known you for a really long time because
Yeah.
when I first I was a child when I first met you at church camp, and I think,
Wow.
yeah, in a camp challenge, and you're
Oh,
you're a couple
wow.
years older than me, and you were always somebody that I recognized as a artist and as a musician that was very gifted and very talented. And you played the trumpet back then. I've always thought of you as a trumpet player, because that was just my memory of you. But I mean, you've taken that trumpet to places that I've never heard before. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
you have experimented, and I hate to use that word, but you've used it in so many different ways that maybe trumpet players do that, but they just maybe don't. You know, People aren't aware of it. But maybe you can elaborate on how
Yeah.
your journey of trumpet playing, and what else do you do besides you play guitar, probably, right?
I do. I really, and thank you very much for those nice words. Uh, I consider my main instrument to be this hybrid world of trumpet and technology.
Hmm.
It's my instrument is all of this stuff. It's a complex organism that acts as its own little thing, right? And I'm not alone. I mean, I was inspired by there's such a lineage of trumpet players doing experimental sounds and creativity, going throughout the history of music, and particularly in the history of jazz. There's so many great trumpet players that brought so much new sounds and techniques to this world. And going back to from Duke Ellington to the Art Ensemble of Chicago to I mean, just on and on and on. So I consider myself, part of this lineage of trumpet players that are like pushing the sounds. And nowadays, there's all sorts of uh, trumpet players that are doing similar stuff. Peter Evans is amazing, um, and actually another uh, uh, Venturan named Brad Hinkle, who now lives in Germany, has taken the trumpet to very exciting places. Nate Woolley. But for me, the people I was listening to were like Lester Bowie, Bill Dixon, Paul Smoker. I remember the first time I got to sit in a trumpet section next to Paul Smoker, I was so nervous. You know, but so there is this lineage of which I consider myself part of,
Hmm.
and a characteristic of that lineage is to keep pushing and adding. And so it's not a. People say sometimes it's like this attitude, like somehow I've rejected the past. For me, it's like to me, it's all about embracing this lineage, and uh, you know the for a lot of people, this music jazz ended in when they got all when they started getting more experimental, quote unquote, in the '60s, really in the '50s. But throughout the history of this music, there is this trajectory of experimenting and looking for new techniques and new timbral and sonic affordances. And so I really connect with that. But I also connect with the Western European art tradition of experimentation. And there's a great history in that as well. So of modern classical music players, people experimenting throughout that history and lineage
Yeah.
as well.
Well, you've been expressing that sort of form for quite a while. When you were younger, were you just kind of a traditional trumpet player? And then at what point did you start understanding what the capabilities are of your instrument and how you can use it in the form that you're currently pursuing?
Oh, that's a great question. Because when we're taught as children in an ideological manner, we're taught that a trumpet sounds like this.
Hmm.
A trumpet player plays these songs. A trumpet player uses these techniques. We have these like very strict uh, things that define a trumpet player. And I was fortunate to study with some great classical music players. And psychologically, it destroyed me.
Mm.
It destroyed my trumpet playing, and because I I could not sound like Maurice Andre, who was like when I was a kid was like one of the classical trumpet players everybody wanted to sound like, or Gerard Schwartz or somebody. These solo instrumentalists that were just doing great stuff. I just couldn't sound like that. No matter how much I practiced and stuff, I just and I was getting miserable because I wanted to sound like this. I couldn't sound like, well, let me rephrase it. I was told I needed to sound like this,
Okay,
right?
there you go.
And so I believed it. And
Hmm.
we're as children told a lot of things,
Right.
and hopefully we examine those as we get older and start to question certain things. Um, so when I went to school, uh, I went to be a lawyer. I was going to be I was pre-law, and I played trumpet just for kicks. Um, And then one day I woke up, I was at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo and said, I really want to study music. So I went to Westmont. I was introduced to this wonderful creative musician, John Rapson, who's now in Iowa, not far from me, which is fun. Great trombone player and composer. And he introduced me to a lot of people that I still play with to this day. This was in the mid 80s, early to mid 80s.
Okay.
Um, and they started to say, things that I would first reject, hey, you know what? Kind of like go with that sound that you like, that makes you, that one you like that feels good, and the one that like you play well. And, you know, don't try to play a solo like this person, try to play a solo like Jeff Kaiser. And I'm like, oh, well, who's Jeff Kaiser?
Mm.
What does this mean? And all of that stuff. So I actually put down the trumpet for several years after that and got a master's in conducting, of all things. And then after that, I'm back in Ventura. A buddy said, "Hey, you should play some trumpet and let's do some of this wacky stuff." And my buddy Garen Horgan, he's in Portland, Oregon, great trumpet player. And so we started doing this stuff, and it was like it just like I stopped like trying to do what people were telling me I should do and just started to play what was meaningful to me, from muted melodic things to crazy double tonguing, multiphonics, squeaks, squawks, farty noises, all the good stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, and so that was in my that was that would have been I would have been in my later 20s at that point, maybe 27,
Mm.
which is wild to think about.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
it
Well,
ended.
you
Yeah, I
go.
remember it ended a relationship. I was actually engaged at that time, and it just was. She just couldn't handle the stuff I was doing, and I just remember her coming to my door uh, and throwing the ring at me,
Mm.
and saying to me, "I never liked your music." She said, I'm like, "Oh wow, that's heavy." But it's like I don't know, but it became meaningful, powerful, and it felt right to me. You know,
Well, you kind of answered a question that I was kind of wondering in this last little bit was that because it is different. It is different. And not a lot of people are exposed to the style of music that you produce. Oh, I thought we were freezing for a sec. But I think you sort of mentioned that, you had a certain teacher that introduced you to a lot of people that you played with and you still play with today. And that was kind of my question. How do you find people that are like-minded and understand what you're doing? Because it seems like it must be like finding a needle in a haystack to me, to be able to find people that go, oh yeah, Jeff Kaiser, I understand what you're doing, let's do this together. So you run into these people or you're introduced to people, and then it happens somehow, right?
yeah, I mean, the internet, of course, made it a lot easier because there's forums and groups and
Hmm.
this and that. So then it was more difficult. Then they had these things called nightclubs that people would hang out at.
I
you
don't
know,
know what you're talking
yeah, I
about.
know. And there was one in particular in Santa Monica called the Alligator Lounge, and they had a series called New Music Mondays that was hosted by the guitarist Nels Klein every Monday. And I met Nels with John Rapson because he used to play with John Rapson, and so they encouraged me to come and play at this venue. And every Monday night, New Music Mondays, the place was packed full of like-minded people, and uh, it was awesome. And it was a community in the like the literal physical sense that we would get together to support and go see each other in concerts, and tell each other of venues, and oh, I'm going to be performing in this state, what venues do you know there? And so it just became this whole network. And with social media, of course, this became uh, a whole different thing. I mean, MySpace was uh, uh, I did Friendster for a minute, but Friendster, like, I joined it and it like disappeared.
Yeah.
But MySpace I mean, I was in Sweden in 2000 and somewhere 2008 with David Borgo. We're doing a gig, and these people were coming up to us and saying, "Yeah, we're your MySpace friends."
Oh my
Uh,
gosh.
so we played to this packed house in Gothenburg at this floating pop-up venue called Broats Now, and so and it's gotten social media's gotten better. It's like people say, "How do you get the gigs?" Well, you keep doing what you're doing and you reach out to people, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, so can you kind of elaborate a little bit on like what are the tools that you use to sort of make the music that you make? I know you use your trumpet, but you're also using software and things like that as well. And I don't really know how to ask the question, but maybe you understand what I'm asking.
yeah, oh no, yeah. So I mean, when you first met me, I was playing trumpet, but I was also playing a lot of guitar,
Okay.
and I played electric guitar into well, like I still do, but in the late '70s, I was playing in these kind of punk bands, not kind of, they were punk bands in Ventura, and I had all these guitar effects pedals, and I got a mic with a quarter-inch plug on it and plugged it into the chain of pedals and started doing that with my trumpet too.
Hmm.
And so this led to me doing this more and more. And I played a lot of acoustic trumpet when I first started on this experimental path, and I still do play a lot of acoustic trumpet. But was also playing with very loud electric guitar players, very loud drummers, very loud bass players, and like many of my colleagues, like I know Emily Hayes is a great flute player. I know she said, I remember her saying in an interview when she was asked, why do you use electronics? She goes, because I play with a lot of very loud people.
Hmm.
And so this put me on the trajectory of using electronics with my trumpet and amplifying it. But plus, I got to admit, I always said that experimenting and exploring is part of my personality. I want to experiment sounds. And I was doing all these techniques on the trumpet, and I don't like the word that a lot of people use is extended techniques, right? That we have these traditional things, and then we have these extended techniques. I actually don't like that phrase, even though it's like a very very common one, because it means that there's proper techniques and then there's extended techniques. I think they're all techniques. They're
Hmm.
all just techniques. There's you know, but I wanted more. I heard things that like guys like Nels Klein and Stuart Liebig and G.E. Stinson were doing that I wanted to do with my trumpet when I was playing with them. So I started plugging my effects pedals chain into that, and then the chain got bigger and bigger and bigger, and so I would be processing the trumpet as you would an electric guitar. Um, and I started touring with that, and what a nightmare! I mean, my friends still do this, still tour with these racks of or boxes of electronic pedals and gear and stuff. And it just got to where I had like two large Pelican roller cases. I mean, big ones, and they weighed 75 pounds each. Just at the time, that was like the international travel limit, and so I would be literally carrying 150 pounds of cases plus my trumpet and the backpack. And I remember, I think it was in 2005, Andrew, maybe 2004, 2005, Andrew Pask and I were in London, and he wrote all his own software. So he had a laptop and his saxophone,
Oh,
and and I'm like carrying 150 pounds of gear. And so
light
I
bulb went
decided,
off.
yeah, I'm like, I'm done. This is not a sustainable practice for my body.
Mm.
I don't want to be 58 years old and carrying around all these heavy cases. So, so anyway, I went home and buried myself into Max MSP, the language I mentioned earlier that was authored originally by Miller Puckett. Then the company was sold to Gibson. Guitars owned it for a while when they owned Opcode. And then David Ziccarelli took over, and that was when it had a huge growth in popularity. And then Ziccarelli still runs the company, but again sold it to Ableton recently.
Mm.
And I just buried myself there in Ventura in at my sister's house, just like learning how to code. It's a visual program environment, so um, it's very conducive to artists that don't want to deal with text-based code. It's like you have an object that does something, and then you connect a cable to another object that does something else, and then you control those objects with other things. It's kind of like building a virtual pedal board, which is
Hmm.
how I first used it, was to create a virtual uh, to mimic my rig. But now the software I develop, and when I do perform with software, it's stuff that I author myself in the Max MSP environment. It's of course a lot more than just the pedals used to be. I'm using all sorts of techniques of like granular techniques where you break the sound into these small little bits and disperse them into the sound field and change the direction. Some are playing forward, some are playing backwards, some are transposed up, some are transposed down, some are regular, all over the place. I use it all goes into uh, uh, an ambisonics. Ambisonics is a form of three-dimensional uh, placement of sound. It's like surround sound, but in three dimensions. And now there's other um, uh, systems that do that. So when you go to a movie theater, if you see Atmos, you're going to probably have three-dimensional sound projection in theaters and stuff like
Hmm.
that. But I use when I granulate it, I throw it into this thing and then put it into the space. So hopefully it becomes, an immersive sonic experience for the listener. Um, but it's all like I said, it's all hybrid. It all works together. Um, the trumpet is going into the software is into the space. I'm hearing what's happening that's influencing what I'm playing, which goes back to the software. It's this big feedback loop of hybridity. So
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I mean, I've heard your. I mean, I would run into you over the years, and hey, how's it going, Jeff, at the coffee shop or whatever, and you would inevitably say, yeah, I've just finished a new album. I'm like, wow, another one. That's cool. And I've listened to a few of them over the years, and I have to say that this time around, as I'm listening, and I started with your most recent that's on Bandcamp. I think it was. I can't remember when you released it. It was if it was 2017 or
is that Kyborg's?
yeah,
Yeah, Kyborg. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We got a new one. We just finished recording in February. Yeah, just and with the Swedish drummer Kjell Nordesen. So David Borgo's a professor I met at UC San Diego, and we became best friends. I mean, he's like my brother.
Yeah, it's the difference I think too for me this time was I was wearing headphones
Uh,
and wearing headphones and listening to your music. Once you sort of get past the fact that okay, this is not rock and roll, this is not a 4/4 beat, and you're listening to something that it was soon that it just started sort of sweeping me away, and not only was I listening and surprised at every corner with the sounds and the music that was I was hearing, in my ears, and it was just fluttering and however you want to explain it. But it was actually taking me on a mental journey. I mean, I was literally like having like almost like dreams in my own head of what this music was telling me, and then when I started reading the titles of the songs, that was incredibly influential on how I thought about the music.
mm,
And even though a lot of the titles I don't even know what they mean, but I sort of
yeah, I don't either.
I sort of derived a meaning from the title, and then I expanded on that. I mean, there was points like hierarchy, the song, and I envisioned this crazy, crazy, just conflict of emotions and just battles and people like almost like like politicians and common folk and the fight for power and to the point where at the end it was just like the hierarchy was almost like uh struggling to survive, and at the very end it just like fades out instantaneously with a little breath through your trumpet, like it's completed, you know the hierarchy has
Nice,
fallen. I mean,
nice.
now it's just one example of the kind of almost like thought movie I was going through listening to your music, and and then, like I said, once you get past the point where, okay, this is not what I'm used to, this is not AM radio, this is not, you know, FM radio, whatever, not rock and roll, you can really, really just get lost in what you're hearing and almost open your own mind from what you're receiving from your music, you know, and almost like I've never done acid or anything like that, but I would say be very careful if you're on acid and you listen to this music
Oh
because
man,
it would change your life and you'd never be the
yeah.
same. It's very, very conducive to thought, I think, really.
Well, yeah, David Borgo is just a remarkable musician and scholar. Uh, and you know we're fueled on vegan food and tea and coffee fuels those sessions. David was like a value added when I went to UC San Diego. I mean, I knew him by name, and I had actually turned down an album he submitted to my label for um, release. I just didn't think it fit the character of our label, but he ended up going with. I suggested other labels, luckily, and he ended up getting probably even a better deal with us. But I went there to study with Mark Dresser. Was there? Miller Puckett was there. I mentioned him. Mark Dresser, the great bass player. Anthony Davis was part of the reason I went there, and he just won the Pulitzer Prize 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
So it's nice to have. He's nice to have a Pulitzer winner on my committee, on my
Yeah.
dissertation committee. You know. So I went there to study with those guys. I thought, and I met David, and we just hit it off. I mean, he's just brilliant author, you know, so scholar, musician, coming out of whereas I came to the experimental pathway focusing on coming out through the classical training as a trumpet. David came through classical saxophone, but jazz saxophone too. And it's with some serious cred. I mean, in 1996, David won the International John Coltrane competition, which is
Mm,
huge.
yeah.
But he doesn't like to talk about that stuff. That was a long time ago, you know. But when you talk about our album, it's really refreshing to hear that because we do both think very developmentally, thematically. We believe we have similar conceptions as to what improvisation with technology based hybrid instruments is about. And so we're able to develop these thematic concepts to where I like you said the word journey, you know, to where they feel almost like they're composed, you
Hmm.
know. And then, you know, we have memory and our systems have memory. So we bring themes back and forth, you know, so it's not just random, you know, this thing about, oh, improvisers just play what they want to play. No, that's actually not true.
Mm.
Um, they might be, but it's like in this case we're, you know, being informed by what each other is doing. But the other thing you talked about was, you know, what I like to refer to as culture clash in the small sense of the word.
Hmm.
If we think of genres as a culture, and if you like say you appreciate classic rock, there's a or just rock and roll, we'll just call it as a genre, and then you take the expectations of that genre and take it to other musics, you know, you're going to find that there might be moments of connection. Like if you went to heavy metal, there might be connection, you know, this and that. They're like little bits of connections, but really, if you take the set of cultural expectations uh, to another genre, and you're just setting yourself up for disappointment, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, it's like traveling the world and going to another culture and expecting them to behave all like Venturans, you
Right.
know. So it's like you have to, in a certain way, try to release some of those expectations and approach the music as to what it brings in this case. Now we can't totally escape that. We can't escape who we are. We can't escape our influences. We can't escape what we like, and these are all perfectly, you know, valid and valuable things. If you like something, well, yeah, then listen to it. You know,
But it
so
could shift your, but if you're willing to shift your mindset, and to go into new processes and new environments with an open mind, it really helps to learn because, like you say, expectations are limiting in so many ways. Uh, Almost always, expectations are limiting, and it's really helpful to just have an open mind with things, and not just music, but with life. Because if you're not open to exploring and experiencing things that you don't know about, perfect example was travel. I've been to other countries, and people put expectations on, here's what to expect, and then you get there, and none of that expectation was accurate at all. It's like
yeah,
they're preparing you for something different, but they don't really know how to tell you what it is. And frankly, it's just human interaction no matter where you're at. And it's the same. So don't try to limit yourself with the expectations. So when you're experimenting or when you're exploring your music, it's really important for someone that's not used to it and maybe a first time listener is to just have an open mind and to be ready for something to sort of take over your own head. And I recommend, if you're going to listen to Jeff's music, if you're watching this, and I'll put some links in the description, is to get some headphones and set some time. Don't try to cook dinner and run around the house with the kids. I mean, for your first experience, really experience it. It's an amazing process, and let your mind just wander and go where it wants to within that just field of sound. It really, really
yeah.
impressed me a lot, and I think keeping an open mind and lowering your expectations or getting rid of them is important in more ways than just music.
Well, I wouldn't say lower expectations. I would say, I would say, yeah, release.
I don't mean
No, I
lower the
don't.
expectations of the quality of the music, but what you think music is and what you are used to, because it is high quality. It's a sonic explosion, really, and it's quite amazing. And I thought well, another thing that was interesting in your music is that you have different themes too. Because I went back to your very first record that I found on your Bandcamp, and it's very different from many others. And as I poked around, you can see the different elements that you've put into the music. Some have strings, some have choir, some have voices. It's very, very interesting.
Oh yeah, well, thanks, man. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. And when I think about, I think my first album I is not available. I think I put it on some ridiculous amount of money because it was pretty rough. But
Hmm.
but we do work on for the record label where most of my albums have been released, which is my own. We started in Ventura in 1999, so we've been going for 21 years now.
Mm.
And about 100, close to 150 releases, over 500 artists on it.
Wow.
But the first one was with my buddy Vinny Golia, who I met back in like I said, back in the 80s when I was working with Raps, and he's part of that crew. And the engineer was Wayne Pete, who I met back in that day. And Wayne, just was talking with him yesterday, legendary Los Angeles engineer, recording, mixing, mastering, you know, works with all the big labels, and he had a feature in Tape Op magazine, if you read Tape Op, and he's just fantastic. Um, but it's like we've always focused on trying to keep the sonic quality there. Now there are some releases that the sonic quality is not as high, but we always try to do, really good recordings because these are like documents and records,
Mm.
you
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah. Well, I find it very fascinating. Um, so you mentioned earlier in the conversation that you pursued a PhD.
yes,
Yeah, and you've achieved that now. Now you're a professor, is that right?
yeah, wild. There was a time where I mean, I finished in 2013, and the time at UC San Diego was wonderful. Um, I just cannot say enough good things about my experience there. Um, and then I went to, I was very fortunate to land a very excellent adjunct position um, at University of San Diego, a private school on the hill there. Um, and at the same time applying for jobs, like, it's like any other job in the post 2008,
Mm.
world. I felt very fortunate to be tucked away at a university during that. Um, it wasn't making any money, but at least like wasn't, anyway, it was okay. But then to apply for jobs, so I was adjunct professor, like so many of my friends, and I just kept at it, and I applied for 180 positions. I have a little over 180 positions, and I have the database of it.
Mm.
I was applying as a performer for jobs that were for performers, jobs that were for composers, jobs that were for music technologists, just talks that jobs that were for ethnomusicologists, because that's really what the focus of my degree was in. Um,
Now,
and
are you applying in universities and school types? Uh,
I was
okay,
all over the world, like
okay,
literally.
yeah.
And I had some, and I had some great. There's this whole sequence for the academic job market, right? You apply for it. If they like you, then they ask for more materials. Then if they like that, they ask for a video interview. And then if they like that, they bring you to campus. And they usually at this time, because there was this glut of, of graduating PhDs, sometimes there'd be, I knew that there was like 300 people that were applying for a job. And so if I made it through to the campus visit, I felt pretty good. But there was a couple times where I was like on a campus visit, and I'll just I'll say one without naming any names. This actually happened a couple times, twice. I was picked up at the airport in a limousine and taken to a hotel suite for the job interview, and then went to campus to do the stuff. And I mean, they were not like, I mean, it was like pretty amazing. This happened two places, but one in particular I'm thinking of. Um, and I thought I did well, but I could tell they were just like, there was a couple people like they were just like all, this isn't classical music, particularly the chair of this one. I remember the exit interview, which the chair of the department usually does, and the chair was all over me. They were like, well, I just don't understand what you're doing. What is this music? And I said, well, what is it that you don't like about it? We ended up having a really nice conversation. Well, it turns out the person that got the job was a recent Grammy Award winner, and so there was this dearth of jobs because of the market crash, and then there was this, all of a sudden people were looking for jobs, and so I found myself in competition with Grammy Award winners, and it was wacky and nerve wracking and crazy, and for 3 years that was my life applying for jobs. I actually started before that, but when I was writing my dissertation, I was only applying for jobs here and there. But to make the long story short, uh, I was I had a really good year, and I just felt that that was the year I was going to get a job. This was 2016, and the interviews were solid. I felt comfortable doing the stuff, and I'm like, okay, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen this year. And then I got a job. I got a call for a position in Missouri. And I'm like, I'm a Southern California. I'm from Los Angeles, and then Ventura, then San Diego. I'm like, oh, Missouri, whatever. And they asked for the extra materials. They did the video interview. They asked me to do the campus. And I had been on a super crazy schedule. I'd gotten married. I had been in Amsterdam and Germany. I came home, was doing the interview, and then I was doing the interview. I would have been there. So I would have flown in Wednesday, come home on Saturday, and then flown to London on Monday for some a conference of gigs. And I was just exhausted. I'm like, oh, I don't want to even go. Missouri, what does Missouri have? Um, and then my wife was driving me to the airport, and she's like, "Oh, just don't go. It's a good year." And she's my wife is a genius. She's a professor Fulbright winner. I mean, mega grant winner. She's absolutely brilliant. And she's like, "I'll don't go. You're exhausted. Take care of your health." And I agreed. And then right then my phone binged. It goes bing. I looked down at Delta. It said, "You've been upgraded to first class."
Oh,
And I'm like, "Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? I'll have a little scotch on the flight, sit comfortable. I'll actually sleep and get some rest away from the internet and my job and stuff." I landed there. I drove through. I'm like, Kansas City, I love. I landed in Kansas City, drove about an hour out to Warrensburg, where I'm at now, and just thought, oh, this is beautiful. This is quite lovely. And then I met the colleagues here, and I was pretty blown away by them. And then I saw the facilities and my chair and now friend Eric Honor and his vision for what the music technology program was to be was outstanding. And I remember calling Andrea and saying, I want this job. I went
oh,
from like not caring about Missouri to thinking it's a beautiful part of the country. It's a lovely university. Um, and I hadn't prepared a lecture for the next day. And as part of the job thing, is you give a lecture to students. And so I woke up at like 3 a.m. with this, like, I want this job. I have to lecture at 8. So I started like creating PowerPoints and throwing slides together. It went well, and they offered me the job. I got home on Saturday. They offered me the job on Monday, and I ended up not going to London. I ended up eating the ticket and everything and just sleeping for a week.
mm,
It was, it's a brutal process, and academia it's an interesting job, and it is a job, and it's got challenges. And my wife and I are both very fortunate to have landed tenure track positions, but uh, it's a rarity now. It's very tough, and so the only word I got is fortunate,
mm,
and grateful,
yeah,
because it's tough out there, and there's don't yeah, it's just it's a tough world. You probably read about it. Universities closing, adjuncts, people, the adjunctification of the university. Not ours. We're both at universities that have a high full-time professor thing, but a lot of universities now. I interviewed at one that only had one full-time professor and everybody else, and 35 adjunct professors.
wow,
And the reason is it gives them financial flexibility to hire and fire, to not pay, certain things and stuff. And
sure,
it's the changing of the world. So we are both grateful and feel fortunate. And I don't know if I would recommend anybody pursue this at this time, but if it's what's important to you, of course, then you should,
yeah, yeah,
and but I no advice in that world. It's tough. But
yeah.
yeah, so I ended up in Missouri, outside of Kansas City.
And you're
Uh,
you're happy?
yeah, I'm
That's
probably
great.
just about as happy as I've ever been.
That's wonderful.
We
Yeah,
never thought we'd own a house,
yeah,
and you know, uh, it's just kind of remarkable. Yeah, it's hard to describe. It's just, it's a lot of work, and it's pretty. You know, uh, I remember somebody stopped me in the grocery store, and she said, "I heard you talking with your friend. You're a music professor. My daughter wants to do that because she heard that they don't work much and they get paid a lot of money." And I looked at her and I said, flip that equation. You know, uh, believe it or not, I was making more as a self-employed musician in Ventura, teaching and gigging, than I do as a professor now.
mm.
But it's a different life, different time. So
So you're teaching, and what level? I'm trying to think of like your students. Are you running into? Are you getting to know some of these younger people that you're hearing what they're doing, and are you impressed by some of these people that you're involved with now and their musicality and their processes? I mean, I mean, how do you see like the future of music and in your field and what you're teaching? Are there people, younger people? I'm not sure how the age of what people you're working with, but I'd imagine it'd be early 20s and things like that. Are you seeing some prodigies and people that are just brilliant, or
Oh yeah. I mean, you can't generalize because you're going to see a spectrum, right?
yeah, of
All
course,
generalizations are false, of course. But
yeah.
but I am Eric Honor, my colleague that founded the music technology program here at the University of Central Missouri, uh, has just built up a remarkable program. And for 16 years, he was the only music technology professor here, which you got to have respect for because people don't understand what we do generally. And I'm fortunate because I came here. I was the second professor that they hired. I'm fortunate because I had a colleague here who understood what I was doing
Hmm.
and stuff. And then we hired a third professor, Travis Garrison, who is now here. So we now have three music technology professors, and our program is growing. We have 20, at least 20, possibly 20, a little bit more than that, incoming freshmen um, to study music technology here, and we see a wide variety. But I will tell you this: that there are many students here that regularly blow my mind.
Mm.
Um, and I'm looking forward to seeing where their careers go. The work that they're doing is just great and all over the place. I mean, some are producing everything from uh, IDM um, gospel Christian hip hop to metal to experimental to jazz. The We don't have this uh, ideology that you have to do only this kind of music here. It's very open, which is one of the things that impressed me with this program. And I just see every day when I'm working here, I see students that are just doing stuff that just blows my mind.
Mm.
And, it's great. And they're introducing me to things. I do like it. I've been around long enough. And when a student does the hipster thing, oh, you probably never heard of this composer, and I'm like, oh, yeah, he's a friend of mine,
Yeah.
or something like that.
Right.
Or
Yeah.
I toured with him, or,
Uh-huh.
it's like, oh, it's pretty fun for that. I mean, so they're not all like that. There's also students that are phoning it in. That's the
Sure.
nature of education. They just phone it in and do the minimal requirement. But at this program here, Eric has created this trajectory that Travis and I are now part of. That is attracting a wide variety of talented students from not only Missouri but from greater expanding areas,
Hmm.
from neighboring states. And we had a student from uh, the Netherlands this year. We're attracting students from all over the world now. So it's
And
very exciting.
and you literally have traveled the world, haven't you, with your and through your music?
Yeah,
Am I correct in saying that you've literally been to a lot of places in the world that
yeah.
probably a lot of many people haven't?
It's pretty exciting, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
What is there one story that you like to tell that of maybe one of the most unusual experiences in playing music in, say, another country comes to mind, or is there anything that's really unique in that experience of being able to travel with your and with playing your music to people that may or may not know what they're in for, or I'm not sure if I framed a question well, but
It's kind of, I just feel really, really fortunate. I consider myself kind of a musical tourist in that um, my love of travel is supported by my music, and I just get to travel to all these really just fun places. As far as particular stories, I they just man, I got a lot, and
mm,
my friends that hang out here with me will like say, "Yeah, Kaiser's got a lot." So
mm-hmm,
telling there's another Kaiser story, but remarkable ones that's popped in my mind. Playing in a basement venue in Vienna with Marco Knighty, who's since passed away, to just a packed house. Um, Playing in Beijing, China, at the Central Conservatory of Music to, you know, literally hundreds of people with a giant 50-foot LED projection screen behind me, projecting my video, experimental video work along with while I'm playing live. Um, I have a great love of Amsterdam, Berlin, Barcelona, Bilbao, and just south of Bilbao is Vitoria. And I've been fortunate to go there previous 2 years to play at maybe 3 years, play at a festival there. I just love it too. Just yeah, it's just so many exciting places, and it's fun for me. And plus, I tend to be, I have some particularities, right? I'm a vegan, so that forces me to go into parts of town where do they offer the vegan food,
Hmm.
and I also have a great love of craft cocktails. Where do they have cocktails?
Hmm.
And so that takes me into these like particular trajectories, and it's like, well, it turns out there's lots of other people like me that do music that like vegan food and cocktails too. um, and here's one. This is weird. I occasionally smoke a cigar. Some people, friends, are concerned because they see me post photos, but I don't smoke daily. At the most, once a week, I'll have a nice quality cigar. But that's taken me to places where I've met wacky people. I've had some fantastic experiences in the US in random cigar lounges. Me being alone in a private cigar lounge with Gary Busey.
Wow.
Um, yeah, the great comedian Jonathan Winters, being alone with him and Reagan's speechwriter. Um, you know, just it takes me to these locations and uh, places to meet like really interesting people. Yeah, it's just travel's been the joy of my life. And of course that's changed dramatically. Last spring I was in Estonia and Finland, and Estonia is, oh my God. Well, we were in Tallinn, so I couldn't say we were all over. We were just in one place of it, but I go back there in a heartbeat. I
Mm,
mean, to do a gig in a converted, basically a converted castle, you
wow.
know, uh, to that's converted to a theater venue. Um, yeah, I was there for it's called World Music Days. It's this 10-day international music festival, and it was absolutely stunning to be there.
Mm,
And then to get 5 days after that in Helsinki. Um, you know, it's awesome. Yeah,
incredible. Yeah, just
yeah. Feel very fortunate again.
yeah. My mind is just trying to like picture images of what you're telling me. Just it just sounds awesome. I love to travel and I wish I could do it more and I plan
Yeah.
to. So you mentioned cigars. Are you an aficionado? I mean, you're sitting in these cigar shops and you're talking one on one with somebody. You must be able to hold a
Oh yeah.
conversation about cigars. You're pretty knowledgeable.
Well, I say I don't smoke that often, but I have smoked for them occasionally for quite a while. Since I was 18, my uncle introduced me to good cigars, but I've got like two humidors behind me full of Cubans from my trips, and as well as quality domestic cigars and stuff. So yeah, it's I do really enjoy. I smoke less and better. So it is, again, it's got to be a very rare thing because tobacco is incredibly unhealthy.
Yeah.
As you know, too many friends yeah, are either addicted or have been addicted and have had health issues. But I think I think every now and then it's okay.
Hmm.
I mean, we can talk about other things that people ingest that are bad for them. But
Yeah.
as a vegan, I could go on for that for a long time, but
Hmm.
I won't.
Well, I'm going to invite you on my vegan channel next week. We can
Oh
discuss
yeah,
there.
vegans and cigars.
Yeah. So, well, Jeff, this has been great. I don't want to take up too much of your time, and but I really appreciate you coming on, and it's been very interesting, and it's really nice to talk with you and sort of catch up. I've always enjoyed your company, and it's just been a really nice time here this morning. even though you made me get up early.
I know, right? Sorry about that.
No, I've
I've
been
got,
up early all week long. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I
Well,
appreciate
yeah,
it.
thanks for inviting me, man. It's great to catch up. Like I said, I mean, I know I've seen you in Ventura since then, having left it in 2007,
Yeah,
but coming back for gigs and stuff and to
sure.
visit
Yeah.
family. My sister is still there, of course, and
Uh-huh.
brother-in-law and
Yeah.
nephews. So,
Right.
but I haven't been back for, well, as long as I've been here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll be back and I'll be sure to give you a holler when I am. So
Definitely. Definitely. It sounds great. Well, once again, Jeff Kaiser, I'm going to put links to his music and his projects. You got quite a few different links there, and I've been exploring them. They're quite interesting looking, and not only, but very high quality websites and things like that. So that it's pleasing to look at, and you can really explore a lot. Um, so I encourage you to click on some of these links and check out what Jeff's been doing. He's got a lifetime of projects there for you to look at. So, once again, Jeff, is there anything you'd like to say in parting before we go?
no, just thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun. It's good
Uh,
to, I mean,
it
it's
has.
always fun to talk about oneself.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do too, is just to expose the artists and the musicians. It's really what I want to do. The basis of the channel. There's other little tiny micro shows that I want to do too, because I want the channel to grow and have more of an audience appeal. But I really want to focus on the artists and the musicians. That's kind of a big part of what I want to do here.
Oh,
So
very cool.
once again, thank you, Jeff. It's been a pleasure, and look forward to meeting you in person again, seeing you in person, and catching up. But this has been wonderful. I appreciate your time today.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, we'll see you
Okay.
soon. All the best to you.